Okay, we're on this side of the map. By the way, the map is obviously for my European history classes. In case you're wondering, this is the map of Europe between World War I and World War II. I hope to teach you all about that in a year or two. Anyway, what are the nature and consequences of these variant political socializations? Well, you've got a public that doesn't agree on everything all the time. That's good. What kind of world would it be if everyone agreed on everything all the time? That would be scary bad. That would be a mind-numbing dictatorship where everything is the same, where everyone is the same. Who wants to live like that? Our world isn't bland, it has spice, and part of the spice of life is variety. That's an axiom. Variety is the spice of life. And part of that variety is it takes all kinds of people. And that includes their political affiliation and activity. So, what are some other things that, well, actually, we're going beyond a person's socialization. We're going to how politically socialized people then come together to make a political society. Okay, the nature and consequences of public opinion. First of all, prejudice. Prejudice, by the way, is not just racism. It means to prejudge something. In many cases, prejudice of a non-racist, bigoted type is actually a good, necessary thing. Educated people have it. They prejudge certain situations so that every time they experience something, it's not completely new. Prejudging things to an extent, as long as you're humble about it and you acknowledge the possibility that your prejudgment is a guess, maybe an educated guess, but still a guess, and that you might be wrong, and that you might have to correct and change your prejudgment, all of that is a part of being a thoughtful, intelligent, sentient human being. So prejudice isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that isn't what they're talking about here. They're talking about bigoted prejudice, which can take many forms. People don't need much reason to hate someone who's different. To be different is to be indecent, is the old saying. To be different is to be indecent. If you're different enough from the people around you, you're not the same as them. I know, it's really good that you're teaching us this, Mr. G. Yeah, I'll say it again. When you're different from the people around you, it means you're not the same as them. That matters because we are tribal. Our gut, our wired-in instincts all say us, them, us, them, us, them, us, them, us, them. We take care of our own. We watch out for each other. That's us. And them, can't trust them. They're not to be trusted. So, if you don't think about it, prejudice can creep in and affect all sorts of people in all sorts of ways. You can dislike bald people, fat people, bearded people, people with glasses, men, teachers, guys with vowels at the end of their last names, men with ties and identification badges, because, without this you wouldn't know who I am at school. You might not like people who speak English, or people who have Irish or Hispanic ancestry. These are all things about me. You might not like people who are conservatives or Christians. You might not like people who are Americans, or from the East Coast, or any number of other things. It doesn't take much for people to say them. And that's what prejudice deals with. How do we deal with the outsider, the outlander, them? By the way, one of the best 1950s horror movie is a movie about radiated giant spiders called Them. I strongly recommend that you see it. It's fun and scary. And they've got a really cool sound effect. So, is the public prejudiced in a certain way? Well, yeah. The classic thing that American history teachers go to is they talk about how racism was just accepted as normal and reasonable back before the 1950s and 60s. That's a gross overstatement, by the way, but the assumption is that Europeans are intelligent and civilized, and that Africans are a bunch of barbarians, savages, and that slavery was something that brought them out of the jungle towards civilization. Now, that's an odious idea, but it was commonly held in the 1600s and 1700s when most of the slaves were gathered, and it was held as a majority opinion by Americans before and after the bloodiest war in our history, the American Civil War. In fact, in the 100 years after the Civil War, throughout most of the old Confederate South, there were a series of Jim Crow laws, which we've talked about, which made blacks second-hand citizens. In fact, the Nazi Party used American Jim Crow laws to develop their anti-Jewish laws when they took power in the 1930s. The same standard, you're considered black if you have one black grandparent, is used by the Nazis against the Jews. You're a Jew if you have one Jewish grandparent. Do you get to choose these things? No, you're born that way. But race prejudice is one of the oldest things that we as creatures have to deal with. Just because it's normal doesn't mean we should accept it. That's the sort of thing we need to control and fight and not give indulgence to. That's one of our modern prejudices. Because out of long experience, it became clear to American public opinion, and this happened in the middle and late 20th century, that in fact, that kind of racism is what we fought against in World War II, is nonsensical and is evil, and we shouldn't do it. No group of people is good or evil based on a birth characteristic. We don't sit around in the guff, which is a Jewish concept for the place where souls live before they're born, deciding, I want to be with that family. I want to be this kind of... No, we're born. It's not our choice how we're born. And to judge someone because of the way they are born is fundamentally un-American. That is what public opinion says today. So one of our prejudices, this is an interesting way of using the word, I think, is that we can assume that racism, bigotry, by birth characteristic is wrong, is unacceptable, is forbidden. That's one of our prejudices. We prejudge all bigotry to be wrong. It's a way of compensating for the past. It's rooted in the idea of the individual being the important thing. We are individuals. And one of the great things about a free society is that we can judge other people and we can be judged ourselves on the basis of our actions, not on the basis of our birth characteristics, race, sex, and all the rest. Next time.